I'm worried about the birth rate, which you alluded to earlier. The contrary to most people think we have like too many people on the planet, but actually this is an outdated view. This is assuming that AI is fine, assuming that there's a benevolent future with AI. I think that the biggest problem the world will face in 20 years is population collapse. I want to emphasize this. The biggest issue in 20 years will be population collapse. Not explosion, collapse. It's very easy to see what the world will look like in 20 years because humans have a 20-year boot sequence. So like you say, okay, well, who was born last year? Okay, now you know what the world looked like in 20 years. It's that easy. Accelerating collapse. And then the common rebuttal is like, well, what about immigration? Like, from where? But Mars needs people. Mars needs people. There's 0 people there right now. So right now it's just a machine planet. There's only some robots there. I think, first of all, I think humans will solve environmental sustainability. In fact, this is a self-fulfilling or unfulfilling prophecy. We must take immediate and dramatic action, and continue the momentum towards environmental sustainability. And China is actually the world leader in this. In fact, I'm not sure how well it is known outside of China, just how much China is a world leader in environmental sustainability. It's extremely impressive. I mean, I think half of all the electric cars in the world were made in China last year, something like that. So I don't mean to suggest complacency, but I do think humans can and will solve sustainability.
If you're in an aircraft and you look down, they say, if you dropped a cannonball, how often would you hit a person? Basically never. In fact, there's stuff falling in from space all the time. Natural meteorites, old rocket stages, all the time. But nobody worries about it because in fact, all humans on Earth could fit in the city of New York on one floor. Don't even need the upper floors. So that's actually, the cross-section of humans as seen from Earth is extremely tiny, basically vanishingly small, almost nothing. So we need to watch out about population collapse. Low birth rates, I think, is a big risk. And it's also not exactly top secret. You can go look at the Wikipedia, birth rate. So, and this is definitely the civilization ends with a whimper, not a bang, because it would be a sad ending, where the average age becomes very high, and really the youth are effectively de facto enslaved to take care of the old people. This is not a good way to end. I think people are going to have to regard, to some degree, the notion of having kids as almost a social duty within reason. I mean, just if you can and you're so inclined, you should. Otherwise, civilization will just die, literally. The birth rate is strongly correlated to, it's inversely correlated to wealth, inversely correlated to education, and correlated to religion. The more religious you are, more kids you will have. And this is true between countries and within countries. In the US, the highest birth rate is in Utah. We are going to face, in the mid part of the century, and particularly the latter part of the century, a demographic implosion, the likes of which we haven't seen, including the Black Plague. The math is obvious. When did China ever experience a 50% reduction in its population? Spain, birth rate of 50%. It's as though someone went through and killed half the population, or at least of the future population. There's something better happen to turn this around. Sustainable energy is important. The faster we transition to sustainable energy, the less of a gamble we're taking with climate. And I think there's going to be a lot of breakthroughs on the medical front, particularly around synthetic mRNA. You can basically do anything with synthetic RNA, DNA. It's like a computer program. So, I think with effort, that's not too crazy. You could probably stop aging, reverse it if you want.
The important thing appreciate is that we are going to exit the fossil fuels era. So it is inevitable that we will exit the fossil fuels era, because at a certain point we will simply run out of carbon to mine and burn. The goal is to exit the era as quickly as possible. That means we need to move from the old goal, with the pre-industrial goal, which was to move from chopping down forests and killing whales, to fossil fuels, which actually, in that context, was a good thing. But the new goal is to move to a sustainable energy future. And we want to use things like hydro, solar, wind, geothermal. Nuclear is also a good option in places like France, which aren't subject to natural disasters. And we want to use energy sources that will be good for 1 billion years. So how do we accelerate this transition away from fossil fuels to a sustainable era? And what happens if we don't? So if we wait, and if we delay the change, the best case is simply delaying that inevitable transition to sustainable energy. So this is the best case if we don't take action now. At the risk of being repetitive, there's going to be no choice in the long term to move to sustainable energy. It's tautological. We have to have sustainable energy, or we'll simply run out of the other one. So the only thing we gain by slowing down the transition is just slowing it down. It doesn't make it not occur. It just slows it down. The worst case, however, is more displacement and destruction than all the wars in history combined. Okay, these are the best worst case scenarios. So then we have about 3% of scientists that believe in the best case, and about 97% that believe in the worst case. This is why I call it the dumbest experiment in history ever. Why would you do this? So the reason that the transition is delayed or is happening slowly is because there is a hidden subsidy on all carbon-producing activity. In a healthy market, if you have, say, 10 euros of benefit and 4 euros of harm to society, the profit would be 6 euros. This sort of makes obvious sense. This is where the incentives are aligned with a good future. This is not the case today. But if you have the incentives aligned, then the forcing function towards a good future, towards a sustainable energy future, will be powerful. In an unhealthy market, you have your 10 euros of benefit, you have your 4 euros, but the 4 euros isn't taxed, so you have an untaxed negative externality. This is basically economics 101. So you have basically unreasonable profit and a forcing function to do carbon-emitting activity, because this cost to society is not being paid. The net result is 35 gigatons of carbon per year into the atmosphere. We need to move away from this and have a carbon tax. But this is being fought quite hard by the carbon producers, and they're using tactics that are very similar to what the cigarette industry or the tobacco industry used for many years. They would take the approach of, even though the overwhelming scientific consensus was that smoking cigarettes was bad for you, they would find a few scientists that would disagree, and then they would say, look, the scientists disagree. So that's essentially how they would try to trick the public into thinking that smoking is not that bad. The solution, obviously, is to remove the subsidy. So that means we need to have a carbon tax, and to make it sort of something which is neither a left nor a right issue, we should make it probably a revenue-neutral carbon tax. So this would be a case of increasing taxes on carbon, but then reducing taxes in other places. So maybe there would be a reduction in sales tax or VAT, and an increase in carbon tax, so that only those using high levels of carbon would pay an increased tax. Everyone needs to take action and care about what the future is going to hold, and lead by example. So even countries that are quite dependent on fossil fuels, if they just change their tax structure, they can move away from that in a way that's not super disruptive to the economy. It's really just a question of collecting
like the same amount of taxes, but weighted towards things that people believe are most likely to be bad instead of things that are most likely to be good. And we do this already in our tax code. We tax alcohol and cigarettes much more than we tax fruits and vegetables. It's just sort of the sensible thing to do. And nobody, you don't hear countries saying, well, we make lots of fruits and vegetables, so like we want low taxes, or we make lots of alcohol and tobacco and we want lower taxes. Like, that's a silly debate. It's gone. And I think the same thing applies to carbon emissions. Just adjust the tax code, and the right thing will happen over time. And if it's graduated over time, and it starts off small and becomes significant in the future, then even if you're heavily dependent on carbon today, that message of seeing what's going to happen in the future will have a huge impact on the way that any given country's economy works. So they will then become not dependent on carbon because of the incentive structure. So I really don't think they have anything to lose here, and anything to lose by taking action, and a lot to lose by not taking action.